Stop it already. I just packed everything up. Now I'm gonna have to repack everything from scratch. My husband, laughing heartily, kicks my suitcase. Thinking this might be the last day I see your face, it kinda makes me sad. Just hurry up and pack your things and get out of here. Although my husband is all for the divorce, he keeps getting in my way. When did he become such a malicious person? Oh, finally divorcing this eyesore of a wife? I'm really glad. I've been fed up with you since the day we got married. My mother-in-law continues to taunt me cheerfully. I've just finished packing my things now. I'll be out in 10 minutes. Saying this, I make a call to someone, and exactly 10 minutes later, the house intercom rings. When I open the door, there are several large trucks and a sleek black luxury car. We've come to pick you up. Are you ready to go? Yes, thank you for coming all this way. I'll leave the rest to you. All right, says the driver, and the muscular men from the waiting trucks begin to move my luggage. From a distance, my husband and mother-in-law, with their mouths agape, watch cluelessly as my belongings are carried out. Hey, I thought you were moving. Why is a luxury car picking you up? Seeing my husband's surprised face, I smirk and open my mouth. My name is Madison, and I'm a homemaker. Originally from a small town, I moved to New York when I got married. My husband's name is Roy. We met through a marriage arrangement set up by our parents and have lived happily in a town near his parents' home. Before marriage, I worked for a trading company but resigned at my husband's request. Although I worked part-time at a small company for a while, I eventually quit due to childcare and other responsibilities, and now I spend my days dedicated to household chores. We have a daughter named Amy. After graduating from college, she started living on her own because her job was far from home. When she was younger, I wished she would grow up quickly, but I felt unexpectedly lonely when she actually left home. At such times, I routinely contact my parents. My parents live far from New York, and I haven't visited them for many years. However, we keep in touch through video calls and texts, and though it's been years since we last met, we're still close. My parents are traditional shop owners. Though their business is small, they have a good selection of local products, and I fondly remember buying souvenirs there. My husband and I are just an ordinary couple. He earns the money, and I take care of the home and our child. We both accepted our roles without complaints. However, since our daughter moved out, I've noticed a change in my husband's behavior. Initially, he was as considerate as a gentleman, always complimenting my housework and giving me flowers on anniversaries. But now, he treats me almost like a maid. He must be stressed from work, I thought, assuming his mood would eventually improve. But taking my silence for granted, his attitude only worsened. Any small mistake would prompt him to call me useless, and if I talked back, he'd retort, "Who do you think provides your meals?" And when reminiscing about the hardships of raising our daughter, he'd say, "Looking after children is your duty, of course it's hard." When I relaxed in my pajamas after a day's chores, he'd mock, "You've just become an old woman." And unfortunately, it's an old habit of his, but when he gets emotional, he becomes violent. Our daughter has seen this too often, and he's excused it as discipline. Once, our daughter tearfully told me, "Dad doesn't help with chores even on his days off. It's sad seeing you work so hard." I tried to explain that we each have our roles, but she seemed unconvinced. Thinking back, I've never seen my husband help with any housework at home. Moreover, using his busy work schedule as an excuse, he has never been involved in raising our daughter. A normal father would at least attend his daughter's sports day, no matter how busy. But my husband never participated in any school events, and it was always me who made our daughter's lunches and captured her school moments. He didn't even bother to take photos with her during her ceremonies. Because of how my husband was, in stark contrast to my good relationship with him, a deep rift has developed between him and our daughter. Since she started living on her own, she often checks in on me, but I've never once heard her ask if her dad is okay. That alone proves it. Lately, my husband's verbal abuse hasn't just targeted me but has extended to my parents as well, which is troubling. The other day, I was talking to my husband about how my parents were doing. My mom called earlier, and guess what? My dad tried to lift something heavy again and hurt his back. He's over 80, I wish he wouldn't push himself. Hope he gets better soon. But, man, they're still running that little shop? They should have retired a long time ago. His demeaning words caught me off guard, and I couldn't help getting a little angry. Hey, what's with that tone? They may run a small business, but they're working hard. Well, it's just not feasible to do business in such a remote area with only family. The products aren't even that great. If it's just a hobby for their retirement, fine, but as far as I'm concerned, it's just a failing small-town business. He smirked and continued to sneer at my parents' work. I just wanted to express my concerns about my parents, but I never expected to be mocked to this extent. Looking at my husband's face, I was reminded of his mother. When I first met my mother-in-law, I thought she was a refined woman, much like my husband. However, as our marriage went on, she began to show her true colors. Now, the house where my husband and I live and my in-laws' house are about a 10-minute drive apart. Taking advantage of this, my mother-in-law comes over unannounced to criticize my parenting. When my daughter was a baby, she insisted on homemade baby food and disposed of the store-bought food. When my daughter reached school age, she brought over brochures insisting on certain high schools. Of course, my daughter rejected every suggestion from her grandmother. If it were genuinely out of concern for her granddaughter, I could understand, but it wasn't. Every time there was a family gathering, she would compare my daughter to other grandchildren, mocking her by saying, "I can't believe she can't even do this, she must not be from our family," and grinning when my daughter got upset. Essentially, she enjoyed tormenting my daughter for not living up to her expectations. Since then, I've been keeping my distance from my mother-in-law. That's what happened today. Even if we're doing business in the countryside, there's no reason for her to say those things. It really gets on my nerves. The night I argued with my husband about my parents, I waited for him to fall asleep, then called my daughter to vent. Lately, every time my husband lashes out, I call my daughter to keep my balance. That guy would say something like that. And he doesn't even care about Grandpa, just spews insults. Isn't his attitude getting worse? Are you okay, Mom? I chuckled inwardly when my daughter finally called her father that guy, feeling the disconnect in her emotions toward him. But since she's entirely on my side, I chose not to say anything. My parents, unlike my in-laws, never belittle her or impose their ideals, so she loves her grandparents. However, she's quite worried that the stress from my husband might be too much for me. I just wanted someone to listen to my gripes, sorry if I made you worry. Well, I talk to Amy quite often, so I'm okay for now. Oh, and I'll try calling Grandpa tomorrow. Really? You're such a hard worker, Mom. Just don't overdo it, okay? Got it. Thanks for today, good night. You should go to bed early too, Amy. After hearing my daughter's response, "I'm not a child anymore," I chuckled and hung up, then headed to bed myself. The next day, before I could call my parents, they called me first. I had a bad feeling that my father's back was worse than I thought, but it turned out to be something else. When I asked what was up, they wanted to discuss changing their shop's business model to adapt to the times and were interested in starting online sales. However, they were unsure how to begin and called me for advice. That's a pretty good idea. And I think I can help a lot if it's me. Before I got married, I worked for a company that managed online shops. I've learned everything from programming sales systems to designing web pages, and even marketing and advertising strategies. My parents asked me if I could join the company as one of the employees and help out. If my skills can be of use, it would be the ultimate way to show my devotion to them. I gladly accepted the task of setting up the online sales. Once that was decided, there was a mountain of work to get started on immediately. After a long time, I powered up my computer and began working for the first time in years. As I was engrossed in my work, time flew by, and before I knew it, my husband, Roy, came home. I'm home. What are you doing? Oh, welcome back. Actually, I've been put in charge of creating the online sales system by Mom and Dad. It's my first job in a while, so I'm quite happy. I'll start preparing dinner soon. Then Roy made that spiteful face again and spoke. Doing that now, for that tiny company? Every company is doing that nowadays, it's pointless. And even if it sells online, no one is interested in such rural products. Roy sneered at me as I faced the computer. As I was thinking of what to say back, suddenly a voice came from behind. Your parents are still working, huh? Managing a small business must be tough these days. To my surprise, my mother-in-law appeared from behind Roy. Her expression, mocking my parents, was just like Roy's. She probably came with him, but I was so engrossed in my work that I hadn't noticed her at all. What you think is up to you. I'm just going to do what I can. I was quite irritated inside as both Roy and my mother-in-law ridiculed my parents, but since he didn't oppose me working, I just continued. After that, my days were quite busy with both housework and work. Occasionally, I would hear about the current online sales situation from younger generations like my daughter, Amy, and her friends, and incorporate their insights. Of course, I shared this information with my parents, and it also benefited the retail sales at the shop. Time flew by quickly, and a year had passed since I took over the online sales from my parents. The sales page on the internet was finally complete. There were parts one was worried about whether it would work out well. However, contrary to my expectations, the products started selling steadily, and sales continued to rise. The company grew enough to open physical stores in various places. Of course, my parents transferred quite a sum of money as my salary, and I had to try hard not to grin when I checked my bank account. By this time, my conversations with Roy had nearly ceased, and we were practically living separately. When I visited my parents several times for work, I consulted with them about my relationship with Roy and my mother-in-law for the first time. Naturally, my parents were shocked and furious when they learned about it. They then proposed something. They suggested that I consider coming back home and taking over the business. In other words, to divorce Roy and leave New York. I couldn't respond immediately at that moment, so I put my answer on hold. I don't mind divorcing Roy. In fact, there would be no problem even if I did it right now. The only thing I'm concerned about is my daughter living in New York. No matter how much time passes, a child is still a child. It's just something parents worry about. I discussed these feelings with Amy, but as we talked, I realized that I really wanted to work. It seems Amy knew this from the beginning and encouraged me, supporting me wholeheartedly no matter where I go. Once I made up my mind, I gradually began preparing to take over the company. One day, on a holiday, while Roy was washing the car in the yard, his smartphone, which was left on the table, rang. Wondering who it could be, I checked the screen, and there was a name Holly displayed. Holly, that's a woman's name, isn't it? Could it be? Feeling a bad premonition, I checked Roy's smartphone thoroughly. Then, I found numerous pieces of evidence of his affair with this woman named Holly. He was cheating on me. I can't take it anymore. I can't stay in the same house with him anymore. At that moment, I decided to leave the house without waiting for the preparations to be finished. The next day, I woke up early to pack my things for the divorce. There was quite a lot to pack, having lived there for many years, and it was a difficult task, but I couldn't afford to show any weakness. As I was busy packing up, Roy finally woke up and looked at me as if wondering what was going on. What are you doing up so early on a day off? Still rubbing his sleepy eyes, Roy complained. I'm leaving this house today. Thanks for everything until now. I haven't had the divorce papers yet, but I plan to visit a lawyer once things settle down. Roy looked shocked for a moment when he heard my words, but he quickly regained his composure and his expression turned almost joyful. Oh, so you've finally decided to leave. I've been thinking you should disappear soon and wondering when to bring up divorce. I never thought you'd be the one to say it first. This is exactly what I wanted. Without opposing the divorce, Roy accepted my decision with a sneer, as if mocking me. I had thought he might cause trouble by finding some excuse to argue, but contrary to my expectations, things seemed to be progressing smoothly. However, Roy seemed to want to do something mean, as he began to get restless and eventually started kicking my packed bags.
Stop it! I just finished packing those, and now I have to do it all over again.
Thinking this might be the last day I see your angry, ugly face makes me a bit sad. But seriously, you haven't finished packing yet? Just get out already. Saying this, Roy kicked my bags again, laughing. He said he wanted me out quickly, but his actions were the complete opposite. I wondered how long he had been this malicious. As I repacked my scattered belongings, my mother-in-law unexpectedly showed up at the house. It seemed Roy had called her.
Finally divorcing this eyesore of a daughter-in-law?
I'm really glad.
I've disliked you since the day you married my son, and I've been at my limit for a long time.
My mother-in-law continued to speak spitefully, clearly enjoying herself. She must have rushed over just for this.
I just finished packing my bags. I'll be out in 10 minutes.
I said this and made a phone call. Exactly 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there were several large trucks and a single black luxury car already parked outside.
Madison, your ride is here.
Are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you for coming all this way.
I'll leave the rest to you. Sure, said the driver, Spencer, before the strong men from the trucks began loading my belongings. From a distance, Roy and his mother watched, open-mouthed and clueless, as my belongings were moved out.
Hey, Madison, what's all this? Why is a luxury car picking you up? And when did you arrange for all these vehicles?
Half in anger and half in shock, Roy demanded an explanation for what was happening.
The company my parents ridiculed has been a huge success. The turning point was probably when we started online sales. Now, we've grown to have several stores not just locally but also in New York, and the profits are incomparable to the old days.
As I stated the facts calmly, Roy completely changed his attitude and began to apologize, looking remorseful.
I didn't know you were so successful. I've mocked you for being just a housewife, but if you have money, maybe I should reconsider the divorce. I'm sorry for how I've treated you.
Roy said that. Disgusted, I sighed.
What's that? You think I'd accept such a flimsy apology?
Panicked, Roy started to stammer out excuses.
I never really meant to divorce you. It was just tit for tat, like going through a rough patch. You just felt trapped because I didn't oppose the divorce, right?
I'm serious.
I've been preparing to leave you for a long time. And I know about your affair. I have all the evidence.
Hearing my words, Roy turned pale.
Of course, your mother knew about it too but kept it hidden from me, right?
My mother-in-law kept her mouth shut, avoiding eye contact. As their reactions showed, both my mother-in-law and Roy were aware of the affair.
And it seems you've started a new family recently.
Good for you.
You knew about that too?
Sweating profusely and shocked, Roy admitted that he had impregnated his mistress. Roy confessed, trying to manage the pregnancy situation, but I had already found out that the mistress intended to be with him. This was revealed through their exchanges on his smartphone, which I checked yesterday. Roy's mistress, Holly, was a married woman. If Holly did not know that her husband was married, I might have blamed him alone, but that doesn't seem to be the case. She was fully aware of the entire situation. I have already informed her husband about the affair through my lawyer. Her husband, extremely upset, has said he will sue not only Holly and my husband.
I didn't hear about this. And there's going to be a child to support. How could I possibly manage this?
As he cried, my husband pleaded with me for mercy.
No matter how much you apologize, I'm not going to forgive what you've done. I forgot to mention that Amy knows about your affair too. She has hired a lawyer and seems to have requested a restraining order against you, her father. What? Why didn't you stop her? Amy is my daughter. This punishment is too harsh for just an affair, oh.
Sobbing, my husband collapsed. Inwardly, I scoffed at him, thinking, you never cared for her once, what right do you have to speak?
Then, having been silent till now, my mother-in-law spoke up, attempting to throw my husband a lifeline with an outrageous statement.
You hid such a big thing as your work success? If that's the case, I won't allow you to just leave the house like this. If you're leaving, leave all the money as damages for keeping this secret.
Although she was furious, it was clear she just regretted losing the money I had. No matter how much she claimed, it didn't change the fact that I was in a favorable position.
Charlotte, thank you for everything until now. Please get along with your new daughter-in-law better than you did with me. Please don't involve me in your life anymore. Goodbye.
With that, I quickly got into the luxury car where Spencer was waiting. The divorce would be communicated later through my lawyer. My husband continued to cry and plead as I got into the car, but I ignored him and drove off. When was the last time I felt so clear-headed? I savored this exhilarating feeling as the car swayed on the way back to my parents' house. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized through my lawyer. I have my savings enough to live on without working for a while. Additionally, there was good news recently. Amazingly, Amy has decided to move jobs and relocate near our family home. I had been unbearably worried about leaving my only daughter in New York, but it seems I wasn't the only one concerned. Amy, too, had been worrying about me as I aged. I found out through my lawyer that Holly had given birth. My ex-husband began living with her and their child at his parents' house, taking responsibility. His mother, stressed by the events, became ill and is now bedridden, requiring constant care. Unable to cope, my ex-husband quit his job to focus on caregiving and raising the child. They are not receiving social welfare and are struggling to get by on his small severance pay. After returning to my parents' home, I continued to work and focused on expanding the business. The effort paid off beautifully, and this year our company was selected for the company award. Thanks to this, the company's reputation soared, we hired more employees, and as the president, I am enjoying a successful daily routine.